a project by crazy Mamjo. Today zombie in North Rhine-Westphalia. It began on an ordinary Monday morning in Düsseldorf. The sun shone through the grey clouds and the streets were full of people on their way to work. No one suspected that this day would change everything. The water on the Rhine was still, broken only by the occasional quacking of ducks. At first, there were only news reports, small and inconspicuous, isolated attacks, unusual acts of aggression, accounts of people suddenly turning on others without any apparent reason. The authorities reassured the public that these were isolated incidents, but the individual incidents quickly multiplied. In Cologne, the first videos surfaced. People filmed neighbors, friends and acquaintances wandering the streets, losing consciousness, followed by other attacks. Within a few days, public life collapsed. Schools closed, shops were boarded up, and the police had lost control. Many initially thought it was a new type of virus, perhaps a strange flu. But that was only the beginning. We lived in an old apartment building in Essen, near the city center. My sister Lena and I had just finished breakfast when we heard the first screams from outside. At the window we saw people staggering, shouting and attacking others. A man pulled his wife to the ground, she screamed. Then he himself was bitten by someone who seemed possessed. The streets filled with chaos. Vehicles were overturned. The smell of burning filled the air. And sirens wailed incessantly. We didn't have time to think, we had to act. I gathered food from the pantry. Lena got the emergency medicine kit. We barricaded the doors, moving heavy furniture in front of them. Outside, the screams grew louder. In the night, we heard footsteps in the stairwell. We held our breath until it was quiet again. Only then did we realize that this wasn't temporary chaos, but the beginning of something we couldn't control. The days turned into weeks. The power went out. Water became scarce. We lived on canned goods, rainwater, and whatever we could find in the abandoned apartments of our neighbors. We learned quickly. Sounds attract them, they're fast, unpredictable, and being bitten once meant you soon lost control. Lena was stronger than I'd thought. She organized our daily explorations, checking out the situation outside. We saw the people around us disappear, either killed or bitten. Some fought back, but most were overwhelmed. I remember the day we found Mrs. Huber from the 3rd floor. She had been bitten but was still alive. She begged us to put her out of her misery. We had no choice. I can still see the images of us helping her before she became a danger herself. Every decision was cruel but necessary. Eventually we heard about a safe zone in Dortmund, supposedly organized by the military and volunteers. We set off, despite the danger. The streets were empty, except for the occasional zombie that attacked us from the shadows. We almost lost a car when a group ambushed us on the highway. We had to continue on foot. The city itself was a scene of devastation. Burned-out vehicles, empty houses, graffiti with messages like "Run," "Don't be alone," and "They're coming." We fought for survival every day. Every day we weren't bitten was a small victory. But our food supplies dwindled, and our physical exhaustion grew. We learned that there would be no rescue from the outside, only ourselves, our own vigilance, and our will not to give up. Arriving in Dortmund, we discovered that the safe zone had been a delusion. There were fences, soldiers patrolled, but it wasn't enough. People crowded at the gates, arguments broke out, and the zombies kept breaking through, often in small groups, sometimes in swarms. I saw men and women who had tried to save others, who had been bitten themselves and dragged everything in their path. Panic spread. We had to move on. On the way to the suburbs, we came across a small village near Wuppertal. At first it was quiet, but we sensed the danger. The houses were deserted, the streets silent. But in the distance we heard screams that echoed through the valleys. Lena suggested using the village as a base. We barricaded the barn at the edge of the village and gathered supplies. The nights were the worst, noises from the forest, the cracking of branches, the groans of the undead. We learned that they were nocturnal. They preferred the dark. We had to be quiet, hide, sometimes stay in the barn for days without seeing daylight. The loneliness wore us down. We encountered other survivors, some friendly, others aggressive. Mistrust became second nature. There were moments when we thought we might find a safe place, but every place proved to be only temporary. Once we heard children screaming, trapped somewhere outside. We tried to rescue them, but it was a trap. The children had lost their parents and were already infected themselves. Lena couldn't bear it anymore. We had to flee while the creatures hunted us. We headed towards the Ruhr area, hoping to find one last refuge. The cities were ghost towns, shopping malls looted, houses ransacked, remains of people who had tried to survive everywhere. I remember the hospital in Essen where we once sought refuge. It was a nightmare. Corpses everywhere, infected people wandering the corridors, sounds of screams and groans. We locked ourselves in an empty room, barricaded the door, but the fear remained. We realized that the world as we knew it had vanished. The supply situation worsened. We collected rainwater in old barrels, food became a precious commodity, and every day was a struggle for survival. We lost friends, people we had met along the way. Their screams haunted us for days afterward. Lena was unwavering, but even she began to lose hope. We knew there would be no happy ending. The disease was spreading faster, the number of infected growing exponentially. We were mere specks in a world of chaos, destruction, and death. One day, while hiking in the woods near Hagen, we stumbled upon an abandoned farmhouse. We spent several days there, gathering supplies and repairing a small shed window so we could observe. But one night we heard the cracking of branches, the groaning of voices. They had found us. We fought, we fled, but they were everywhere. Lena was bitten before we could escape. I held her in my arms as she transformed, and then I had to leave her behind to survive. I ran, not knowing where, through fields, across roads, past the remnants of civilization. The months passed and I learned to survive on my own. I hunted, gathered water, and hid during the day to forage for food at night. Every day was a test. Every mistake could be fatal. I watched as the infected populations wiped out entire villages and towns until only emptiness remained. The sounds of the undead were constantly in the distance, a stark reminder that there was no escape. I encountered no more survivors, only the dead who weren't truly dead. In the autumn of the second year, when fog lay over the Ruhr region, I found a house that appeared to be abandoned. I locked the doors and barricaded the windows. I sat there, alone, hunger gnawing at me, the loneliness overwhelming. I knew I would soon have no strength left, that the world around me consisted only of screams, groans, and emptiness. There was no safe place left, no peace, no salvation. The cold of winter set in. The streets were covered in snow, but that didn't stop her. They kept coming, incessantly, hungry, endlessly. I wandered through deserted cities, always searching for food, water, a spark of hope that never came. The sounds were ever present. Every night I crept through the streets, hearing screams that made my heart clench. In a small town near Bochum, I found a group of survivors, but it was an illusion of safety. Within a few days, the fragile alliance collapsed. Hunger, fear, and mistrust led to violence. Some were bitten, others killed, and I fled back into the woods alone. Nature was reclaiming the cities, but that didn't make things any easier. The creatures were everywhere. They had adapted, becoming faster, smarter, more merciless. I learned that there was no aftermath, no rescue, no end to the nightmare. Every day was just another stretch of the struggle for survival, until you were too tired, too injured, or too hungry to go on. I saw corpses being eaten by rats, houses engulfed in flames, children who couldn't understand why their world was falling apart. Loneliness became my constant companion, hunger my reality, fear my routine. I spent the last months of my life in an abandoned factory near Dortmund. I locked doors, repaired windows, collected rainwater, and hunted small animals. I heard the incessant groaning outside, knew that any mistake could mean my end. One evening, as the fog settled over the land, I heard the sounds right outside the door. I had no weapons left, no strength to fight. They broke down the door and I knew it was over. No escape, no miracle, just the end, inevitable, final. The world as we knew it no longer existed. Cities were empty shells, villages dead, streets filled with silence and death. The infected ruled everything, and I was just another shadow being devoured by them. Thus, it all ended not with hope, not with salvation, but with the inescapable realization that humanity had no chance against its own destruction.